And welcome back to another edition of Interesting Stuff, the Homeschool Educational Supplement, where we take a look at alternative topics that have caught our eye and maybe have just passed other people by. And today we will be looking at the ancient Olympics. Now, it's generally thought that the first ancient Olympics took place in around 776 BC in Greece, and the Games were a series of athletic competitions among representative city states. They were held in honor of Zeus, and the Greeks gave them a mythological origin. They appear to have been popular and continued to be celebrated when Greece later came under Roman rule in the 2nd century BC. That was until Emperor Theodosius I, who, having been converted to Christianity, banned all pagan festivals. So he banned the Olympics around about year 394 as part of the campaign to impose Christianity as the state religion of Rome. So during the actual games themselves, an Olympic truce was enacted between states so that athletes could travel from their cities to the games in safety. The prizes for victors were olive leaf wreaths or crowns. And of course, the Games became a political tool used by city-states to assert dominance over their rivals. Politicians would announce political alliances at the Games, and in times of war, priests would offer sacrifices to the gods for victory. The Games were also used to help spread Hellenistic culture throughout the Mediterranean, and the Olympics featured a variety of religious celebrations. And interestingly, perhaps you know that the statue of Zeus at Olympia was counted as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And so to the ancient Greeks, it was important to root the Olympic Games in mythology. During the time of the ancient games, their origins were attributed to the gods and competition amongst the gods. However, the origin stories of competing legends persisted, and who actually was responsible for the genesis of the games is generally unknown. Yet the patterns that emerge from these myths are that the Greeks believed the games had their roots in religion, that athletic competition was tied to worship of the gods, and that the revival of the ancient games was intended to bring peace, harmony, and a return to the original classical Greek lifestyle. Areas around the Mediterranean had long had a tradition of athletic events. Ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians depicted athletic scenes in tombs of kings and their nobles. They did not, however, hold regular competitions, and those events that occurred were probably the preserve of kings and the upper classes. Minoan culture held gymnastics in high esteem, with bull leaping, tumbling, running, wrestling, and boxing all shown on their frescoes. The Mycenaeans adopted Minoan games and also raced chariots in religious or funerary ceremonies. It's well known that Homer's heroes participated in athletic competitions to honor the dead. In the Iliad, there are, in fact, chariot races, there's boxing, wrestling, a foot race, as well as archery, fencing, and classical spear throwing. His Odyssey adds to this list with the long jump and the discus throw. Interestingly, however, the only competition officially held at first in the Olympics was noted down by the Greek traveller Pausanias, who wrote in the year 175 that a race over 190 meters was organized and measured at the feet of the statue of Hercules. The race was called the Stadion, which is actually where we get the word stadium from today. Now, the Romans, in their quest for domination, conquered Greece, and the Olympics continued. But the events declined in popularity throughout the pre-Augustan era. During this period, Romans largely concentrated on domestic problems and paid much less attention to the needs of their provinces and the people there. In 86 BC, the Roman general Sulla robbed Olympia and other Greek treasures to finance a war. He was the only Roman to commit violence against Olympia. Later, Sulla hosted the games in 80 BC as a celebration of his victories over Mithridates. I've probably pronounced that wrong. Never mind. During these games, supposedly the only contest held was the Stadion race, because all the other athletes had been called to Rome, presumably on military duty. It's not much of an Olympics, really, is it, if you've only got one race? Now, under the rule of Emperor Augustus, the Olympics underwent a bit of a revival. Before he came to full power, Augustus's right-hand man, Marcus Agrippa, restored the damaged temple of Zeus, and in 12 BC, Augustus asked King Herod of Judea, interesting historical tie there, to subsidize the games. While no Roman actually ever entered an Olympic event at Olympia. That's interesting. In the early years of Augustus's reign, some of his associates, including the future emperor Tiberius, won equestrian events there. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? How could Tiberius have won if no Roman had ever entered an Olympic event there? Well, if you can riddle me that one, then you can let me know. Anyway, Augustus was declared a god by the Senate after his death. Right. As you do, yeah. A statue of his likeness was commissioned at Olympia. Subsequent divine emperors also had statues erected within the sacred Altis. The stadium was renovated at the command of Augustus, presumably before he died, and Greek athletics in general were subsidized by the state. One of the most infamous events of Olympic history occurred under the rule of Nero, the madman. He desired victory in all chariot races at the Panhellenic Games in a single year, so he ordered the four main hosts to hold their games in the year 67, and therefore the scheduled Olympics of year 65 were postponed, just like that. At Olympia, he was thrown from his chariot, but still claimed victory. No megalomania there, then. Nero also considered himself a talented musician, so he added contests in music and singing to those festivals that lacked them, including the Olympics. Despite his terrible singing, he won all the contests. Nothing has changed, right? No doubt because judges were afraid to award victory to anyone else. After his assassination, the Olympic judges had to repay the bribes they received. History is interesting. Now, the 3rd century after Christ saw a decline in the popularity of the games. The last surviving victory list of the Olympiad is from 217, and no surviving text of subsequent authors mention any other Olympic victors. Excavated inscriptions show that the games did, however, continue. Until recently, the last securely datable winner was Publius Asclepiades, I think I got that right, of Corinth, who won the Pentathlon in the year 214. In 1994, a bronze plaque was found inscribed with victors of the combative events, hailing from the mainland and Asia Minor, proof that an international Olympic Games continued until at least the year 385. The games are believed to have continued past then, by which time flooding and earthquakes had damaged buildings and invasions by barbarians had looted most of the available history. The site where the actual games was held was uninhabited through most of the year. And during the times of the events, the site often became overcrowded and congested. There were no permanent living structures for spectators who, rich or poor, had to make do with tents. Ancient visitors also recall being plagued by summer heat and flies. It was such a problem that sacrifices were even made to Zeus. The site's water supply and sanitation was finally improved in the 2nd century. But previous to that, it had been a pretty tough festival to attend. In terms of culture, the ancient Olympics were much more a religious festival than an athletic event. The games were held in honor of the Greek god Zeus, and on the middle day of the games, 100 oxen would be sacrificed to him. What a waste. Over time, Olympia, the site of the games, became a central spot for the worship of the head of the Greek pantheon, and a temple built by the Greek architect Libon was erected on the mountain top. The temple was, in fact, one of the largest Doric temples of the Greek period. And as mentioned previously, the games were also political, and power in ancient Greece became centered around the city-state in the 8th century BC. The city-state itself was a population center organized into a self-contained political entity. These city-states often lived in close proximity to each other, which created competition for limited resources. Though conflict between the city-states was ubiquitous, it was also in their self-interest to engage in trade, military alliances, and cultural interaction. The city-states had a dichotomous relationship with each other. On one hand, they relied on their neighbors for political and military alliances, while on the other hand, they competed fiercely with those same neighbors for vital resources that they needed to survive. The Olympic Games were established in this political context and served as a venue for representatives of the city-states to peacefully compete against each other. While the martial truce was observed by all participating city-states, no such reprieve from conflict existed in the political arena. The Olympic Games evolved into the most influential athletic and cultural stage in ancient Greece, and arguably in the ancient world. As such, the Games became a vehicle for city-states to promote themselves. The result was political intrigue and controversy. For example, Pausanias, a Greek historian, explains the situation of the athlete Sotades. Sotades in the 99th festival was victorious in the long race and proclaimed a Cretin. That was a good thing at that time. Probably pronounced Cretin, actually. As, in fact, he was from Crete. But at the next festival, he made himself an Ephesian, being bribed to do so by the Ephesian people. For this act, he was banished by the Cretans, which doesn't sound too dissimilar today to different sports players being bought by different teams. And the team which has the most money obviously buys the best players. And about the events themselves, well, apparently, starting with just a single foot race, the program gradually increased to 23 contests, although no more than 20 featured at any one Olympiad. Participation in most events was limited to male athletes, except for women who were allowed to take part by entering horses in the equestrian events. And our knowledge of how these events were performed primarily derives from the paintings of athletes found on vases. For most of its history, the Olympics were performed in the nude. Pausanias says that the first naked runner was Orsippus, winner of the Stadion race in 720 BC, who simply lost his garment on purpose because running without it was easier. The 5th century BC historian Thucydides, I I'm sure I got that one wrong, credits the Spartans with introducing the custom of publicly stripping and anointing themselves with oil in their gymnastic exercises. You know, it would be a funny world if they still did that today. Come to think of it, it's probably a good thing that they don't. Anyway, that's it. That's our overview of the ancient Olympic Games. I hope there was something new, something interesting, something enlightening there for you. As always, under the accompanying video, you will find some comprehension questions to check your understanding. And if you like a different topic, you can let me know. So that's it. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I wish you a fantastic day, and I will speak to you again soon. Take care.